The 14th Panzerjäger Company was assigned as the forward advance unit, and at precisely 0500 we marched. The crumbling ruins of burned-out houses stood as mute witnesses to the fighting that the city of Yaroslav experienced during the Poland campaign, which, although only 2 years hence, seemed a lifetime ago. With the crossing of the San River at Radimo, we had Russian soil beneath our feet. We passed a large German cemetery from World War I with a faded wooden sign above the entrance, to the memory of those comrades who fell at Dubrovica. Our column was not permitted to stop long enough to examine the graves, and little did we realize how many cemeteries of our own would line the roadsides deep into Russia. We soon encountered fresh mounds of earth marked by rough birch crosses, topped with the unmistakable steel helmets of the German Wehrmacht. These first silent, bloody witnesses on the highway to the east were arranged in regulation rows and columns, and we attempted to divert our gaze, but were always drawn back to the graves. We marched on without speaking, and the silent red-brown mounds of earth seemed to beckon to us as if to say, "Do not leave us here, do not abandon us in this strange place." Faint artillery fire could be heard from the direction of Lemberg. The condition of the roads became steadily worse, and dust settled thickly on the lancers, horses, and vehicles. Only the dim silhouette of the vehicle ahead of our platoon was visible, as the sun stood like an orange globe in its zenith, barely penetrating the choking clouds of dust. Sweat and dirt combined to create bizarre shapes on the faces peering from beneath the heavy green helmets. Near Krakowice, we again combined shelter quarters to tent and spend the night. Our odyssey into the void continued as we advanced toward an unknown destination. We encountered primitive villages lining the road, and Russian women and children peered at us intently from the shadows of doorways and gazed at us through the protection of rough-hewn window panes. The only men to be seen were ancient veterans of other wars. When asked, the people of the villages would tell us of the Bolsheviki. The menace and terror of the Siberian penal camps could be seen in the eyes of these people as they spoke, and they told us that pictures of Christ and Stalin hung in the schools. When the village teachers asked, "Whom do you thank for your daily bread?" the children would be compelled to answer Stalin. We were relieved that we were experiencing firsthand the effects of communism, and that what we have been hearing could not simply be attributed to our own propaganda. Niedermeyer remarked, "After having seen Russia, we now know how fortunate we are to be German." On the 5th of July, we moved through Lemberg. The city had been heavily hit twice during the initial course of the war, and the early morning haze revealed burned-out factories, ruined homes, and destroyed tanks with greasy black smoke billowing from the still-hot carcasses. In one of the few partially intact sectors of the city, a long line of people waited in front of a bread depot. They stared at us with listless eyes as we passed. The Russian airbase at Lemberg had been rendered unusable by the Stukas. Blackened aircraft and smashed equipment were scattered throughout the area, and during a pass on our march, soldiers wandered among the wreckage, photographing one another alongside destroyed Soviet planes and curiously picking through the ruins, ever mindful of strict regulations against looting or the non-authorized requisition of captured enemy equipment. The war with the Soviet Union being only a few days underway, we still observed anything associated with the Soviet army with curiosity. Our march continued through the first half of July. For days, great numbers of destroyed Russian tanks lined our path, and capsized prime movers with limber field guns were scattered along the roadsides. In the fields one could see numerous abandoned Russian artillery positions that appeared to be intact, indicating how quickly our offensive had overtaken the Soviet defenders. We were astonished at how well motorized the Soviet army was, as our own artillery was represented primarily by horse-drawn equipment reminiscent of World War I. The graves of German and Russian soldiers were now found to be close together, the German graves marked with rough-hewn wooden crosses to the right of the road, the Russians to the left. The Russian graves remained nameless, marked only with rifles and bayonets stuck into the fresh earth. The German graves were topped with the customary steel helmet, and from some of the crosses hung identification discs from linen string, waiting to be collected and filed. On the 8th of July, as we neared Brody on the wide rutted road, we passed supply units and cable layers of the 71st Division of the 6th Army. The cable layers advised us that the division had taken Lemberg with 600 casualties and confidently reported that the war was to end within several weeks. Our advance halted on the old Russian Galician border. We expected to encounter strong enemy opposition when the 6th and 17th armies reached the Stalin Line, a series of bunkers and heavily defended strongpoints. We were disappointed to learn that the 132nd Infantry Division had received the assignment to remain in reserve, as most of us were eager to see action before the inevitable surrender of the Soviet Union. 14 July passed without notice. Our existence remained marked by boredom. Our environment consisted of 100-meter-wide transport roads, dust, mud, burning heat, thunderstorms, and an endless open space with only occasional clusters of sparse trees stretching to the horizon. Thatched-roofed huts of the collective farms could be seen in the distance, and we concentrated on them, like palms in the desert, to guide us to primitive wells. We had received word that the wells were often poisoned by the Red Army in retreat. Skeletal remains of horses left a lingering stench along our path, the smell that would remind us forever of the Soviet paradise into which we found ourselves marching ever deeper. The advance slowed as we crossed through Yampol. Occasionally, we were lucky enough to obtain a few onions and carrots from the villages that lined our path. More rarely, a chicken or a couple of eggs served to augment the monotonous field rations.